Hello and welcome to Criminal Record, the Daily Record's weekly crime show. My name is Norman Sylvester and I'm crime reporter with the Daily Record. My special guest today is Liverpool-born crime writer Richard Elias. Now working in Glasgow, he's here today to talk about the historic links between organised crime in his home city and those in Scotland, particularly Glasgow. That link was highlighted with the arrest last year of Merseyside man Michael Riley, who's been accused and charged with the murders of Scottish underworld figures Ross Monaghan and Eddie Lyons Jr. in a bar in Fuengirola in Costa del Sol, Spain. Richard, welcome to Criminal Record. Tell us, what do you know about Michael Riley and his links to the double murder of Eddie Lyons and Ross Monaghan?
Hello, Norman. The answer to that really is Riley is a very unknown factor. He hasn't been on the radar of a lot of people for quite a while. He does have various previous convictions, but when I was making inquiries about him when his name first surfaced, nobody initially knew who he was. And it was only a few days later that I was speaking to a solicitor who's got very good experience. He's been there doing it for decades down on Merseyside. And he said that if it was the same Michael Riley that he thought it was, he described him as being a very nondescript individual and quote unquote somebody who he wouldn't send to the corner shop for a loaf of bread. So he was very, very surprised to have Riley's name thrown into the ring for this.
If we go back to the double murder, it's a horrific crime and a very brazen crime. It was the night of the Champions League final. The game had finished after going to extra time. People were just sitting about enjoying the late evening, sitting outside, just enjoying the late evening sun, if you like, or the warmth of that sort of summer's night. It's on a kind of main road. There's a lot of bars nearby. This gunman walks in, shoots Eddie Lyons Jr., who we believe is outside, then chases Ross Monaghan inside and opens fire. At the time, it was kind of described as quite an expert hit, but you seem maybe suggesting somebody, a professional hitman or some sort of hired assassin, but you're suggesting Michael Riley doesn't really fit that profile.
From the people I've been speaking to, Michael Riley does not fit that profile at all. And also, as you said, Norman, the people I've spoken to who watched the CCTV of the actual shootings said straight away, this is somebody who has handled weapons before, is proficient in using weapons, and also has the, one of a better word, bottle to actually shoot two people dead in a crowded bar and then walk out without really seeming to care.
We know that people may have seen the horrifying footage on CCTV of the incident, albeit it's fairly blurred images. Tell us how the Spanish police identified Riley as a suspect. We've got to point out he's only a suspect this time. How did he come to the attention of the police then?
Well, initially CCTV, but according to the Spanish, Riley had used his own passport to travel into Spain. He apparently flew into Portugal and then across into Spain. A hire car was booked in his name, all of which does not indicate a professional hitman. But it was about 2 weeks after the shootings that Riley, who's originally from Bootle on North Merseyside, he was arrested by the Armed Response Matrix Merseyside police team at a house in Huyton on the south of Merseyside, and then was taken down to Westminster Magistrates Court, which is the main extradition court in England. And he was on remand at Wormwood Scrubs for several months before he was initially fighting extradition, but for whatever reason, and quite surprisingly, several months later, he dropped his opposition to being extradited. and was sent back to Spain, where he currently is.
When the police are doing an investigation like this, what assumes that we know the Spanish police were getting assistance from Police Scotland, what assumes forces in England, including the National Crime Agency. Would that be how they maybe pieced it together? There's obviously the CCTV as well. We believe he may be somebody similar to him, or CCTV may be a factor as well in identifying him as a possible suspect.
Yeah, well, apparently CCTV at the airport in Spain or Portugal, CCTV at Leeds Bradford, where it's said that Riley flew out a few days before. So if you've got CCTV from 4 different locations, and these days the police are experts in analysing CCTV, they can probably, the equivalent of a paper trail with a human being, follow his movements before, during and after the shootings.
At the time of the double murder, the police set up Operation Portalege, which was an investigation into kind of violence in Glasgow and Edinburgh, which basically involved machete attacks on individuals and commercial and people's homes being set on fire and firebombed. Now, this was seemed to be part of a resurgence of a wider, longer-running feud between 2 Glasgow crime families, the Lyons and the Daniel families, and there seemed to be a bit of a feud within a feud where individuals within and associates of the Daniel family were being targeted, allegedly by a Ross McGill with connection to the Lyons family over an alleged drug consignment paid for with fake cash. So the police were investigating that at the time, and then on top of that came the double murder in Fuengirola. Police Scotland said at the time there wasn't a link. You know, there were 2 separate coincidence, if you like, in the investigation in Scotland to the various firebombings and assaults were unconnected to the double murder in Spain, and that hadn't been planned in Scotland. But that doesn't really appear to be the case, does it? I mean, there is a link, a connection, if not direct, indirect.
Yeah, there's certainly an indirect connection. I think, in a way, Police Scotland may have backed themselves into a corner here, because whilst there is no direct evidence to link, you have prominent figures from the Lyons family who have been murdered during an ongoing Glasgow-based, Glasgow-wide feud, which has involved members of both the Lyons and the Daniels family. Now, obviously, the Spanish police, the officer in charge, days after the shootings of the 2 men, he claimed that there was a direct link between the gunman and the Daniel family. This has been categorically denied repeatedly by Police Scotland, and interestingly, every time there's a denial from Police Scotland, it comes from somebody in increasing seniority. Now, we have to take them on what they say. They say there is no direct link, there is no connection, but if it does come to light that somewhere behind the scenes there is a link, Police Scotland are going to have some awkward questions to answer, because they have repeatedly denied any link between Scotland and these killings.
During the initial investigation, the police in Spain were asked, is there a connection? One of the senior officers said that there was a connection between a suspect and the Daniel family, didn't they? So he made that connection, naming the Daniel family. So he said, in effect, there was a connection between the double murder and this ongoing, long-running feud in Scotland.
I mean, those comments prompted, I wouldn't say uproar, but certainly prompted a very strong reaction from Police Scotland. They were immediately responded to this within a matter of hours, and then have since escalated this denial every time it's been repeated.
And they did admit at the time that they were providing assistance to the Spanish authorities, because obviously it was 2 Scottish individuals that would be known, or the two victims would be known to the police of Scotland. I think what we can say is that the violence is part of a wider criminality that we've seen in Scotland over the years. I don't think there's any doubt about that, is there, really?
No, clearly it was there were targeted killings. There were well-known figures with underworld links. So it's certainly not a random event, and it's clearly connected to something in the underworld. Whether it relates to the two families or something else will come out in the wash.
Come out in the wash. As I said earlier, what the double murder did show was the traditional crime links between Scotland and Liverpool, particularly Glasgow. We know historically that in the past, Scottish drugs gangs have sourced a lot of drugs going back, amphetamines, ecstasy, heroin, and more recently cocaine, which is a big sort of international drugs market. Tell me about that history. How long does that go back? Is that something that's always been there, or is it more to do with the kind of drugs connection, the ability with Liverpool being a port, for example?
Yeah, I think the big factor for Liverpool and Merseyside is the port. They've got the container terminal at Seaforth, which, whilst it's one of the most secure areas on Merseyside, is a direct link to South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and due to the difficulty in being able to search such huge container ships, the opportunity has always been there to bring in large amounts of narcotics, whether it be initially 50 years ago, cannabis, and then moving into heroin, and then moving into ecstasy, and obviously cocaine nowadays, and ketamine.
We know historically there's a history of couriers being sent down to Liverpool to bring consignments back to Scotland, and that's over the years where the Police Scotland or various police forces in Scotland have had success intercepting a lot of these couriers as they come into Scotland, having been in Liverpool, maybe often being followed to Liverpool and then back. But we're told now that a lot of the crime gangs in Scotland, organised crime groups, are sourcing their drugs, particularly cocaine, direct from South America, from the drugs cartels, often via Europe. Does that, as Liverpool's kind of importance as a drugs hub, is that diminished at all? Is it still probably as active a hub? When you look at the drugs that are coming in Scotland, whether it be cocaine, heroin, or ketamine, or whatever, is it still a lot that's still coming from Liverpool, or is it all coming from elsewhere?
Liverpool, Merseyside remains outside of London, if not number one, certainly in the top three drug trafficking hubs in the UK. I think this is highlighted by the fact that the only city in England where the Albanians don't either run the drugs trade or have a very high influence is Merseyside. They have involvement, but it's run by Merseyside gangs. This has been something that's been happening for decades, and I think it comes down to the fact, again, you've got the port, you've got the distribution up to Glasgow, you've got the M6 route, which invariably, as you were saying, Norman, regularly leads to so-called routine stops on the M6. As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as a routine stop. They have the information, the police, they know what they're doing. And I mean, down the years, as we both know, there's been many, many significant seizures just on that route, on that motorway.
That's right. We've got that route M6 then onto the M74, and we've seen a lot of seizures, stops at kind of service stations. I think the most popular one for a while was Hamilton, the one at Hamilton, and obviously individuals under surveillance. Sometimes by chance, we've seen chance stops, people stopped by traffic cars and what have you. I mean, we're talking about the Liverpool-Glasgow Scotland connection. Would it be other organised crime groups across Scotland be into that kind of link, or would it be mainly coming Liverpool-Glasgow, then being farmed out to other parts of Scotland?
Yeah, the main connection is Liverpool-Glasgow. Obviously, in the last 10 years, maybe 5 years, you've seen the rise of county lines operations, which are affecting not so much cities in Scotland,
Smaller
but towns and villages. Now, whilst Wolverhampton and Birmingham have for a good while been looking after the Aberdeenshire area, Inverness, the Far Highlands has had a proliferation of Liverpool-based county lines gangs. I think there's what a lot of people don't realise is that organised crime is like any big business. People want to make the most money, and if they can make the most money by not interfering with other organisations in different areas, then the paths don't cross, because if you do that, you lose money. You also bring the interest of the law enforcement onto you. So it's divvied up in a way.
There's a big market that's played to what I just read about county lines people. That's really where crime gangs infiltrate small towns, maybe take over a premises, maybe a vulnerable individual, somebody who's a drug user or addict themselves, and use that as a base for selling drugs in a smaller community. I suppose Glasgow or Edinburgh or some of the bigger towns. Tell us a bit about the crime gangs over the years, just generally in Liverpool. There's obviously been no names like Curtis Warren going back, and there was a tragic murder of Rhys Jones in 2007. He was caught in a kind of crossfire between feuding gangs, and it was dramatised on television with Stephen Graham playing the part of the police chief that brought those responsible justice. Tell me a bit about the crime gangs over the years and how big they are, and how many there are. Is Liverpool awash with different gangs? Is it quite territorial, or does everybody leave each other to do their own thing?
I think that's an interesting question, because 25 years ago, there were probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen major players in and around Merseyside. And as I've said, they tended not to tread on each other's toes. But in recent years, you mentioned Rhys Jones' murder. That was very much neighbourhood disputes, literally postcode gangs feuding over a square mile, half a square mile. Whereas the likes of Warren, the likes of the Heighton firm, the likes of, in the 60s, Tommy Coniford, these people would deal wide scale, globally, whereas now there's a lot more gangs just running estates, individual estates, even down to a couple of streets, and that's really just come to the fore in the past 10, 15 years.
So you say that Liverpool, a lot of the big crime gangs, which we've seen evolve in Glasgow, the west of Scotland, or across Scotland now, it tends to be more localised, is it?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons...
Where are they sourcing their drugs from then?
There's still the major players, half a dozen or so on Merseyside, they're still very heavily involved. But a lot of the gangs that have sprung up is as a direct result of various vacuums that have occurred since EncroChat was smashed. EncroChat has had a devastating impact upon Merseyside's top tier gangsters.
And just to explain, that was a system, an encryption system, which organised crime groups used. EncroChat, it means they could email and text each other without being intercepted. And I believe it was the French police about 4 or 5 years ago, they cracked a code, and it means that police officers can basically troll through emails and text messages and phone messages and just kind of tie them into organised crime.
I mean, the impacts of the EncroChat being smashed are still being felt. You still get court cases. It's almost 4 years now since EncroChat was taken apart.
But having said that, still Liverpool's a lucrative drugs market where a lot of profits can be made. And have we seen the type of violence in Liverpool that we've seen in Glasgow in recent years? We've seen at least 2 murders linked to the Lyons-Daniel feud and various other attacks, attempted murders. Has there been a similar story in Liverpool? Quite a lot of violence linked to the disputes?
I mean, I have to say Merseyside has a much higher propensity for firearms-related violence than Scotland and the west of Scotland. Again, the ability to source weapons through the port, and for years there's been what they've been described as a so-called lending library, where you can basically rent a weapon for a fixed fee. For a further fee, you can buy ammunition. If you use the weapon, you have to pay an increased fee. The weapon is then handed back, and you're often, in major court cases, you'll hear that a weapon has been used in 3, 4, 5 separate attacks, and it's down to this lending library system that's been in existence for 30-odd years, at least on Merseyside.
You mentioned there about the EncroChat. Is it the case that in Liverpool a lot of the main players have been taken out, but other people are stepping in? Is that the pictures emerging? Is always people willing to, as Scotland or Glasgow, willing just to step in and fill that vacuum?
Yeah, I think, within months of these major players being taken off the scene, other people were moving in. But obviously, as I said, taking organised crime as a legitimate business, the people who take over may not have the contacts, may not have the trust, may not have the financial backing that they need, that these people who've been doing it for years have acquired.
Just to return to the sort of Glasgow-Liverpool connection, if we look at the connection, it's really a drugs connection, isn't it? Otherwise, there's no real, we know going back further to the 50s, 60s, even the 70s, there was strong connections between Glasgow and London, Edinburgh and London, through the armed robbery gangs, organised crime, then you go back to the Cray twins. But the connection really with Liverpool would be probably from the 1980s onward, wouldn't it? To this day, wouldn't it? Yeah. The drugs, it's heroin, cannabis, the whole drugs market exploded.
Certainly mid-80s, early 90s, that's when it really, really kicked in. And I think there was a report that 80% of Scotland's narcotics at one stage were being sourced directly from Merseyside.
Would that still be the case?
I don't think that the figures are that high, but I think it's still significant.
High. That's right. And obviously that would be a connection, a lucrative connection, on both sides of the border. And really, we were talking there, maybe the mid-80s, really, we're talking about 40 years, in a sense, haven't we? 40 years of business trading,
Yeah. I mean, certainly when I was working in Liverpool, there were several high-profile cases involving top-rank individuals from Merseyside having dealings, connections up in Scotland, particularly Glasgow. I mean, one of the best examples of that is a guy called John Hass. John Hass is probably best known. Him and his nephew, Paul Bennett, were arrested on a massive drugs importation involving them and a gang of Turks. They got very hefty sentences, but were released within a year, maybe just under a year, by the then Home Secretary, Michael Howard, because Hass and Bennett had provided details of arms stashes around the northwest, Uzis, AK-47s, etc., etc. So because of their information, they were released. But it later came to the public knowledge that one of their close associates was the nephew of Michael Howard. And what had happened was Hassan Bennett had arranged for these arms caches to be bought and then hidden. And then they gave up the information to get themselves out, which they did. Within 18 months of Hass getting out, he was caught sending up weapons, ammunition, including the Magnum, up to Glasgow to a very well-known crime figure in the west of Scotland, and was, as a result of this, arrested and banged up again. That's one example. Another example was the murder of a guy called Warren Selkirk. Warren Selkirk was a courier from Merseyside who was working for a guy from Scotland called Ian McAteer. Ian McAteer was based in Dalmuir, just outside Clydebank, and had quite a fearsome reputation.
Known as Mad Jock, I think.
Mad Jock or Small Hands. And he had quite a fearsome reputation. Warren Selkirk was a family man, quite a likeable guy by all accounts, but had a very, very bad gambling habit. And Warren foolishly decided that once consignment of money that was due to be passed on to the Liverpool dealers by Selkirk, he would use it to have a gamble and pay off some debts. Unfortunately for Selkirk, his gamble didn't pay off in a number of ways, and he was found shot dead at Crosby Marina, just by Seaforth Container Terminal, in 1999. Alongside his body was a small plastic bag of dog excrement, which was later found to be a sign from McAteer saying, "Don't mess with me." McAteer was later arrested at his house in Dalmuir by armed police, taken down to Merseyside, charged and convicted of the murder. But during that trial, it was clearly evident that there had been a lot of transactions, north and south, north with the drugs, south with the money, involving McAteer, and his connections to other Merseyside criminals were also publicised.
It was he was convicted of the murder of Warren Selkirk,
Yeah,
and given a life sentence.
yes.
Do we know where he is now? He's still serving that?
As far as I'm aware, he's still inside, yes.
Still serving the sentence. So that would kind of illustrate it, at various levels, the kind of day-to-day business and all the kind of subtext of all that, the consequences in terms of violence that's been perpetrated. Is there an equivalent at the moment in Liverpool of a feud? We've seen the feud in Scotland between the Lyons and Daniel crime families that's resulted in violence, both at home and abroad. Is there something similar in Liverpool? Does it tend to be more people just get on with things?
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, it's much more business run. Whilst there are a lot of, particularly in the north of Liverpool and in Bootle, Little and Seaforth areas, there are a lot of very small gangs. There's been numerous fatal shootings involving these gangs. The major players try to keep a low profile. They don't want law enforcement. They don't want the National Crime Agency or the Matrix going through the doors. If they can keep it business, keep it quiet, it means a better lifestyle for them, more money, less hassle. And I think they're quite happy if these kids are in the gangs, on the street gangs, the postcode gangs. They are taking the attention away from them. That suits them.
So what we see in Liverpool is more a kind of small, sort of local territorial disputes, almost as you say, postcodes, rather than people at the top end of the scale sort of tit for tat shootings.
Yeah, they tend to, the people at the top will keep themselves very much to themselves. They will carry on with their dealings. The dealings will be global. They will be, whether it be southern Spain, whether it be South America, whether it be United Arab Emirates. These deals will continue, but they will continue low key. They're not in any way high profile.
I was going to say that we know now, we've said reporting criminal records in the Daily Record about the number of organised crime groups who base themselves abroad. We know Spain is a traditional one, but more recently Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. The Liverpool gangs are much the same, and presumably they now do business over there rather than in the bars and restaurants of Glasgow and Liverpool. It's more likely to be in Dubai, the Emirates, or something like that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, last year there were, within a matter of weeks, there were several incidents in southern Spain, at least one fatality, and it was Liverpool individuals, but they were associating with the Irish gangs, and also obviously down there because of the geographical proximity. The Moroccans have a major influence, as they do now in Amsterdam. And I think that has also seen a shift towards the United Arab Emirates by not so much the Irish, but certainly Merseyside, Manchester, and Scottish gangs have decided that maybe it's a bit more salient to be in the UAE.
Well, we don't have an extradition treaty, unlike Spain.
Yeah, that's major reason.
We know the authorities in the United Arab Emirates have received information and intelligence from the National Crime Agency, which covers UK, Police Scotland, about the activities of senior organised crime group members. But it's still a bit of a bolt hole for them, isn't it? Because obviously the kind of bureaucracy in getting extradition, what have you, is a lot harder.
I think it always used to be, up until very, very recently, which we saw with the Ross McGill and etc., that if you're in Dubai and operating at a criminal level, but you weren't impacting Dubai itself or the local people in Dubai, the authorities would just turn a blind eye. But now, I think there's been a shift in a geopolitical way that the authorities in the UAE don't want bad publicity, so they are starting to crack down on individuals. We've seen it with the Kinahans. The Kinahans now are under severe pressure.
That's an Irish crime family.
That's the Irish crime family who've been based in Dubai for a good number of years, but now a lot of them, one of them members was extradited last year. He was
back to Dublin.
He was back to Dublin. The main Kinahan figures are reported to have either left completely or are spending much less time in Dubai than they have been in the past because they're starting to feel the pressure from the authorities.
The pressure. Just talking on that, we know that the police in Scotland and in Merseyside have a lot of success over the years in bringing a lot of the drug couriers, operators, people at the higher level to justice. Do you think generally the police have got a handle on it? It just seems to be that almost never ending, that as soon as somebody's arrested, it goes to prison, somebody else is taking their place.
I think that overall the police have, whether it be Merseyside Police, Police Scotland, or the National Crime Agency, they are pretty much up to date and keeping speed with developments. But the trouble is, as you know, Norman, with your experience, organised crime, if you describe it as a roundabout, if you get caught, you're off the roundabout. It's very difficult to get back on. Somebody is taken out, whether he's arrested or shot, there are always people who we've discussed before see the profits
And the lifestyle.
and the lifestyle. There will always be people looking to take over and to replace these individuals, and it's a game of catch up for the
new kid in the block, isn't it?
exactly. I mean, EncroChat was fantastic for the law enforcement agencies, but I'm led to believe that within 6 months of EncroChat, I think that was June 2022, within 6 months there was a replacement encrypted phone service, which is yet to be broken.
And that would be a new generation to replace the ones that have been arrested.
Yes.
Just finally coming back to the double murder of Ross Monaghan, Eddie Lyons Jr. and the arrest of Michael Riley. We know that he was extradited back to Spain in October to stand trial. Do we know it? Will there be any dates for a trial? Do you know when that's likely to happen? I mean, the Spanish system, is it quite a long drawn out? Do you expect something soon?
I did a story tail end of last year, and the indication was it could be anything up to 2 years. I don't think in Spain they have the same timetable, the strict timetable that they have in the UK. So by all accounts, Riley could be languishing in a Spanish cell for quite some time before being brought to trial.
Well, certainly we'll keep an eye on that. It's something we'll be watching with interest. Thank you, Richard, for joining us. And thanks to our audience for tuning in to Criminal Record. If you have a question for the team, you can email reporters@dailyrecord.co.uk with the subject line Criminal Record. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can subscribe to listen to this podcast on Spotify or Apple by searching for Criminal Record, or you can watch it each week on our YouTube channel. Thanks once again for joining us.